The heart of the Cathar Ascendancy was a chamber of polished obsidian and captured starlight. On Cathar Prime, a world swathed in perpetual twilight, the Grand Conclave convened within the spire of unyielding will, a monument carved from the core of a mountain. Gravity plates hummed a near-silent threnody, holding the vast, circular room in a state of impossible suspension over a chasm of glowing geothermal vents. A holographic projection of the known galaxy, a swirling, majestic tapestry of light, dominated the center of the chamber, its colors reflecting in the impassive, carapaced faces of the Empire's highest echelates. There was no throne, only a raised dais from which the supreme arbitrator presided over the assembled might of a civilization that had measured its existence in millennia. For all its grandeur, the air was thick with a tension that felt heavier than the planet's dense atmosphere, a disquiet that emanated not from a threat, but from an insult, an impossibility. Supreme Arbitrator Vorlag, his obsidian carapace etched with the sigils of 1,000 conquered systems, stood with his 4 powerful arms crossed, his gaze fixed on a single, unremarkable point of light in the holographic display. It was a pale yellow star, indistinguishable from countless others, yet it was the source of the profound disturbance that had rippled through the very foundation of imperial doctrine. He gestured toward it, a motion of contemptuous dismissal. "It is a declaration of madness," Vorlag's voice resonated, a low, grinding sound like tectonic plates shifting. "From a species barely out of its planetary cradle. They have known the stars for a flicker of an instant, a blink in the eye of our history, and they presume to issue decrees to the Cathar Ascendancy." He turned his multifaceted eyes upon the assembled members of the conclave. "Let me repeat the transmission, lest any of you believe my interpreters have failed me." A section of the holographic galaxy dissolved, replaced by stark, simple text in the Ascendancy's angular script. It was a direct translation, stripped of all diplomatic pleasantries, for there had been none to begin with. "Earth bans the Empire, cross the line, trigger the end." A collective hiss of disbelief and outrage swept through the chamber. The words were an absurdity, a paradox. The concept of a single, primitive world banning, an empire that commanded fleets like migrating constellations, was laughable. The notion that they could trigger the end was the delusion of a species that had mistaken its own microscopic importance for cosmic significance. Yet the message had not been delivered with the frantic rage of a cornered animal. It had arrived via a simple, unencrypted wideband transmission, delivered with the cold, sterile finality of a star chart update. It was not a plea. It was not a threat. It was, most unnervingly, presented as a statement of fact. "They have drawn a line," Vorlag continued, his voice dripping with scorn. "A demarcation in the void around their local cluster, a line they forbid us to cross. They claim any imperial vessel, any energy signature of Cathar origin that passes this arbitrary boundary will precipitate a cataclysm of their making. The arrogance is breathtaking. It is a child drawing a line in the dirt and commanding the tide to halt." Beside the dais stood Elder Xyler, his own carapace a muted gray, smoother and less ornate than Vorlag's, marked by age rather than conquest. He had served 6 arbitrators, and his wisdom was the bedrock upon which much of the Empire's modern stability was built. He did not share the arbitrators' incandescent fury. Instead, a deep, cold unease settled within him, a feeling he had not experienced since the long-forgotten void wars against the sentient swarm. "Arrogance, perhaps, Supreme Arbitrator," Xyler's voice was softer, a rasp of dry leaves. "Or something else. We must consider the nature of the messenger, not just the message." A fleet commander, his carapace a burnished bronze, scoffed audibly. "Their nature is evident, Elder. They are primitives. Their technology is barely a generation beyond chemical propulsion by their own historical records. We observed them for cycles. Their expansion has been timid, their footprint negligible. They have colonized a handful of barren moons and lifeless rocks within their own system. They possess no fleets of consequence, no energy signatures that would register as a threat to a single Imperial cruiser. They are insignificant." "And yet," Xyler countered, turning his ancient eyes toward the commander, "the insignificant have declared a ban on the significant. This is not the action of a rational primitive species seeking to preserve itself. A rational primitive would beg for inclusion, offer tribute, or feign ignorance. They would not issue an ultimatum that invites their own extinction. There is a logic here that we are failing to perceive, a variable missing from our calculations." Vorlag slammed a heavy hand down on the edge of the dais. The impact sent a deep, resonant chime through the obsidian. The variable is insanity, Elder. They are a plague of the mind, a species whose arrogance has outstripped its evolution. We have offered them a place in the ascendancy. We have offered them the stability and protection that comes with our guidance. We have offered them enlightenment, a future free from the chaos and self-destruction that typifies nascent civilizations. Their response is to spit in our eye. They will be taught the meaning of consequence. They will learn that the tide does not heed the lines drawn by children. He swept his gaze across the conclave, his voice rising in power. The Grand Fleet is already massing at the Vespasian relay. They will proceed to this line. They will cross it, and they will continue to the source of this insolence. We will dismantle their pathetic orbital structures, we will silence their transmitters, and we will impose upon them the order they so petulantly refuse. We will show them what the end truly looks like. It is the end of their foolish, self-important delusion of sovereignty. A chorus of assent, a gravelly rumble of approval, echoed through the chamber. The path was clear, righteous, and in accordance with millennia of imperial doctrine. Weakness could not be tolerated. Defiance could not be permitted to fester, lest it spread to other, more impressionable client races within the ascendancy. Only Xyler remained silent, his mind a whirlpool of troubling thoughts. He had studied the humans more closely than any other in the conclave. While the military strategists saw only their lack of warships, Xyler had seen other things. He had analyzed their expansion patterns. They did not seek resource-rich worlds. They did not claim verdant garden planets. They established small, meticulously shielded outposts in systems with peculiar gravitational or quantum signatures. They were not prospectors, they were observers. They were not colonizers, they were scientists. And their communications. The Ascendancy had monitored their primitive networks for decades. Amidst the chaos of their art, politics, and endless internal squabbles, there was a core of scientific and philosophical discourse of staggering depth. They debated the nature of reality, consciousness, and the ultimate fate of the universe with a fervor that bordered on religious. The Cathar had long ago abandoned such navel-gazing. The universe was a physical reality to be conquered and ordered, not a philosophical puzzle to be solved. And yet, the human message was not philosophical, it was absolute. Supreme Arbitrator, Xyler spoke again, his voice cutting through the rising tide of martial certainty. A question, if I may, the wording of the message. Trigger the end. Not we will bring the end, or we will destroy you. The phrasing is passive. It suggests they are not the agent of this destruction, but the catalyst, as if their line is not a wall, but the pin holding back a landslide. The bronze carapaced commander snorted. Semantic games, Elder, a primitive's attempt at poetic intimidation. They wish to appear as if they command forces beyond their control. It is a bluff, and we must call it. Perhaps, Xyler conceded, though his internal doubts coiled tighter. But we know so little. Their core world, Earth, is shielded, not with energy but with information. Our deep-range probes can map its continents and oceans, but all attempts at psychic resonance at deep data infiltration have failed. It is quiet, too quiet. A world of billions of sentient minds that presents to the galaxy as a silent stone. This is a technological feat that should be beyond them. It suggests a discipline, a unity of purpose, that their chaotic surface broadcasts belie. Vorlag's patience was wearing thin. They are hiding, Elder, like insects burrowing into the soil when a shadow passes over. Their silence is fear, not strength. The Grand Fleet will be that shadow, and it will not pass. It will descend. We have debated this long enough. The decision is made. The Empire's authority must be absolute. The humans will be brought to heel. The holographic galaxy shimmered and returned to its full glory. A crimson line of light extended from the Vespasian relay, slicing through imperial space toward the small, unremarkable system designated by the humans. The line stopped precisely at the edge of the territory they had claimed. It was a visualization of the Empire's intent, a declaration in light and energy that was far more potent than the humans' simple text. The conclave watched, a silent consensus finally settling upon them. It was the way of things. The strong dictated reality to the weak. The old and wise corrected the errors of the young and foolish. The Cathar ascendancy was an instrument of cosmic order, and these humans were a discordant note that must be silenced. But as Xyler watched that crimson line advance, he could not shake the image of the human text. It was so simple, so certain. It was the kind of language one used when describing a law of physics, not a threat but a warning. A signpost placed before a cliff edge, stating simply, "Step beyond this point and you will fall." And he was forced to wonder with a cold dread that felt alien in his ancient soul, what if the humans had not built a weapon? What if they had simply discovered a cliff? The journey of the Grand Fleet was a stately, inexorable procession. It was not a single entity, but a flowing river of star-eaters, void-reavers, and world-breakers, their colossal forms blotting out the constellations behind them. To the Cathar, it was the ultimate expression of their philosophy. Order made manifest, power given form, will imposed upon the chaos of the void. At its heart was the unyielding will, the arbitrator's own flagship, a vessel so vast its internal gravity was a measurable force. Aboard its command dais, a smaller, more intimate version of the conclave chamber, Vorlag watched the star charts update. Elder Xyler stood at his side, a silent specter of caution. They were days away from the so-called line. Communications from the human homeworld remained utterly silent. No pleas for mercy, no frantic attempts at negotiation, no panicked military deployments. Their space was as quiet and serene as it had ever been. The silence was beginning to fray the nerves of even the most hardened commanders. It was unnatural. A prey animal, upon sensing the approach of a predator of such magnitude, should exhibit one of two behaviors: panicked flight or a final, desperate display of aggression. The humans were doing neither. They were simply waiting. "They are frozen in fear," the bronze commander, Fleet Master Grok, surmised, his voice a low rumble. "Their primitive minds cannot process the scale of the consequence they have invited. They are paralyzed." "Paralysis and calm can appear identical from a distance," Xyler murmured, his gaze lost in the swirling void of the forward view screen. "I have reviewed the data from our initial observations again, the energy signatures of their outposts. They are remarkably efficient, almost zero waste heat. Their technology, while not powerful in a military sense, is elegant. It whispers where ours roars. There is a subtlety to them that we have dismissed as weakness." Vorlag turned his massive head toward the Elder. "Subtlety does not halt a world breaker, Xyler. Elegance does not shatter armor plating. Their silence is an admission of their impotence. They made their foolish declaration, and now they wait for the inevitable. They hope we will falter. They hope our resolve will crack. They do not understand the nature of the ascendancy. Our will is singular. Our purpose is absolute." As they drew closer, the region of space the humans had designated took on a strange quality. To the naked eye, it was no different from any other stretch of the void. But to the ship's advanced sensorium, it was an anomaly. It was clean, too clean. The background radiation of the cosmos was subtly muted. The quantum foam was less agitated. It was as if a veil had been drawn over the fabric of reality, smoothing its imperfections. Cathar science had no explanation for it. It was a phenomenon they had never encountered, and its existence so close to the human homeworld was unsettling. "Report," Vorlag commanded, his voice sharp. A sensor technician, one of the smaller, more neurologically specialized Cathar castes, responded without turning from his console. "The demarcation line is now within extreme sensor range, Supreme Arbitrator. We are detecting nothing. No ships, no weapons platforms, no minefields, no energy barriers. The space beyond the line appears identical to the space on this side, save for the persistent quantum dampening effect." "They are a phantom," Grok sneered, "a species of ghosts and empty threats." The moment came. The lead scout vessels of the Grand Fleet, sleek, predatory ships designed for speed and reconnaissance, approached the invisible boundary. On the main viewscreen of the unyielding will, the tactical display showed their icons gliding smoothly over the crimson line that represented the Empire's advance. Nothing happened. The ships continued on, their engines leaving faint trails of ionized particles in the void. They passed the line, and the universe did not end. A collective sigh of relief, of vindicated certainty, filled the command dais. Grok let out a low, guttural laugh. "The child's line has been crossed. The tide has not receded. Their bluff is called." Vorlag's posture straightened, his immense form radiating an aura of absolute triumph. "As I predicted, they are nothing. A footnote in our glorious history. Proceed with the main fleet, set a course for their primary world, and open a channel, all frequencies. I wish to address them myself. I will give them one final chance to accept our enlightenment before we are forced to carve it into their world." But Xyler was not watching the triumphant advance of the fleet. His ancient eyes were fixed on the sensor technician. The smaller Cathar was frozen, his manipulative tendrils hovering motionless over his console. A low, insistent alarm, a sound Xyler had not heard in his long life, began to chirp softly from the technician's station. It was not a warning of an external threat. It was a fundamental systems error alarm. "What is it?" Xyler asked, his voice low and urgent. The technician finally turned, his multifaceted eyes wide with a confusion that bordered on terror. "The scout ships, Elder, they are no longer reporting." Grok overheard him. "What do you mean, communications malfunction? Have they entered a jamming field?" "No, Fleet Master," the technician stammered, his tendrils trembling. "It is not a loss of signal. All their systems were reporting perfectly. Their engines, life support, navigation, everything was optimal. And then all signals ceased simultaneously, not cut off, not jammed. They simply stopped. One moment they were transmitting petabytes of data, the next there is only silence." "Visuals," Vorlag commanded, his triumphant mood souring into irritation. "Magnify the position of the lead scout." The view screen zoomed in, the image stabilizing into a crystal-clear depiction of the void where the scout ship should have been. But there was nothing there. No wreckage, no flash of an explosion, no cloud of vented atmosphere. The ship was simply gone. The other scouts, too, had vanished. The tactical display, once showing their icons moving confidently into human territory, now showed only empty space beyond the line. A cold silence descended upon the command dais. It was a silence born of impossibility. Cathar ships did not simply vanish. They were monumental constructs of armor and energy designed to withstand the fury of a supernova. Even in death, they left a corpse, a field of debris, a radiation signature, a scar upon the void. This was not destruction. It was absence. "Long-range scans," Vorlag's voice was a low growl of disbelief. "Full spectrum analysis, find them." Minutes stretched into an eternity as every sensor on the unyielding will was focused on that single patch of empty space. The results were more disturbing than the disappearance itself. There was no trace, no lingering radiation, no gravitational distortion, no echo in subspace. The ships, their crews, their very matter, had ceased to exist in any detectable form. It was as if they had never been there at all. And then a new signal was detected. It was not a weapon firing, nor was it a hail. It was a single, tiny vessel appearing precisely on the human side of the line. It was small, unarmed, and radiating no energy signature that suggested hostility. Its profile was simple, elegant, almost fragile against the backdrop of the uncaring void. It was accelerating slowly on a direct course for the unyielding will. "A human ship," the technician reported, his voice a whisper. "It is broadcasting a standard diplomatic request to approach signal on a Cathar frequency." The absurdity of the situation was staggering. The humans had just, by some unknown and terrifying means, erased a squadron of Imperial scout ships from existence, and now they were sending a lone, unarmed envoy to, what? Negotiate, surrender, gloat. "They are mocking us," Grok hissed, his mandibles clicking in fury. "Let them come. We will tractor them in and tear their ship apart molecule by molecule until they tell us what sorcery this is." "No," Xyler said, his voice imbued with a sudden, chilling authority. He stepped forward, placing himself between Grok and the arbitrator. "We will not. We will wait. We will listen. We have mistaken their silence for fear and their warning for a bluff. We have been wrong. It is time we learned the nature of our error." Vorlag looked from Xyler's determined face to the image of the approaching human ship. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty, of genuine primal fear, entered his ancient eyes. The tide had not halted at the line in the dirt. It had touched it, and a piece of it had been unmade. He stared at the empty space where his ships had been, and then at the solitary human vessel gliding serenely toward his invincible fleet, and he finally understood. This was not a negotiation. It was a lesson. And it had only just begun. The human ship came to a stop at a respectful distance from the behemoth that was the unyielding will. It was a thing of stark beauty, its white hull gleaming softly in the light of the distant star. It had no visible weapon emplacements, no shield emitters, not even the customary maneuvering thrusters that dotted the hulls of Cathar vessels. It moved with a silent, impossible grace. The request to open a communication channel was accepted. Vorlag, flanked by Xyler and Grok, stood before the main holographic projector on the command dais, his form rigid with a mixture of imperial authority and barely contained apprehension. The projector flickered, and the image of a human appeared before them. It was a female of the species, her features symmetrical and placid. She was dressed in a simple, dark blue uniform devoid of rank or ornamentation. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face. Her eyes, a deep brown, held a profound and unnerving calmness. There was no triumph in her expression, no arrogance, no malice. She looked upon the assembled might of the Cathar leadership with the detached, professional air of a scholar, addressing a curious but potentially volatile specimen. "I am Ambassador Eva Restover of Earth," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, the Cathar translation flawless and unaccented. I speak for the unified peoples of the Sol system. Vorlag's fury, held in check by the shock of his vanished ships, now returned. You have destroyed vessels of the Cathar Ascendancy, he boomed, his voice shaking the very deck plates. You will explain this act of unprovoked aggression, or your world will be reduced to dust and memories. The human ambassador did not flinch. Her calm expression remained unchanged. There was no aggression, Supreme Arbitrator, and we destroyed nothing. What you witnessed was a consequence, not an attack. We broadcast a warning. We defined a boundary. We stated the outcome of crossing it. Your ships chose to validate our statement. The result was conclusive. Conclusive, Grok snarled. You call the erasure of our warriors a conclusive result. What weapon did you use, human? What cowardly, dishonorable device did you deploy from the shadows? Ambassador Rostova's gaze shifted to the fleet master, and for the first time a flicker of something akin to pity touched her eyes. You misunderstand. There was no weapon. There is no device in our possession that could do what you witnessed. We did not act upon your ships. We merely observed as the universe did. You are operating under a fundamental misapprehension of the nature of reality, a misapprehension that your entire civilization is built upon. This statement, more than any threat, struck the Cathar with the force of a physical blow. It was an assault not on their fleet, but on their very identity. The Cathar knew the universe. They had mapped it, tamed it, bent its laws to their will for 10,000 years. Xyler stepped forward, his voice a low, steady rasp. Explain, Ambassador. Your words are abstract. Our ships are gone. Our people are dead. Give us a truth we can comprehend. Rostova's gaze softened as she looked at the elder. She seemed to recognize in him a mind willing to listen, not just react. Very well, Elder Xyler. I will endeavor to be precise. The region of space you have just entered, the space we refer to as the Silent Veil, is unique. It is a zone of what our physicists call high causal stability. The fabric of spacetime here is pristine, unstressed. She paused as if to let the concept settle. Your civilization, like many others of a certain technological threshold, utilizes a form of faster-than-light travel and power generation that is, for lack of a better term, brute force. Your FTL drives do not bend spacetime. They tear it. Your energy reactors do not draw power from a vacuum. They fracture it. Each use, on a scale so small you have never learned to measure it, inflicts a wound upon the substrate of the universe. A tiny, insignificant wound. But you are a vast empire of countless ships and worlds. You have been inflicting these wounds for millennia. The universe, in its own way, heals, but the healing leaves scars, an infinitesimal degradation of physical law, a loosening of the bonds that hold reality together. On the dais, the Cathar listened in stunned silence. This was not the language of war. It was the language of physics, of cosmology. It was a lecture. We call this phenomenon, Rostova continued, her voice even and measured, substrate decay. It is a form of entropy accelerated by the very technologies you believe make you powerful. Your empire is, quite literally, fueling the heat death of the universe. But the effect is slow, cumulative, and would not reach its conclusion for eons. In most of space, the background damage is so great that reality has become pliable, forgiving. It can tolerate the violence of your technology. She gestured to the space around her ship. But not here. The Silent Veil is different. It is an anchor point, a region where the structure of reality is still in its original, perfect state. It is not flexible. It is brittle. When your ships crossed the line, their drive fields and power cores, which tear at spacetime as a matter of course, entered a medium that would not tear. It shattered. The fundamental laws that held their matter and energy in a coherent state ceased to apply to them. They did not explode. They did not disintegrate. They simply stopped being. The cascade failure was instantaneous. Their own technology unmade them. The silence in the command chamber was now absolute, profound. It was the silence of dogma collapsing. The Cathar saw themselves as masters of the universe, but this human was describing them as a disease, a slow-acting poison, and their power not as a tool of order but an agent of chaos. Vorlag, his mind struggling to reject the horrifying implications of her words, found his voice. Lies, a clever fiction designed to terrorize us. You have a weapon, and you are trying to disguise it as a law of nature. We are not, Rostova said, her tone unwavering. We have no need for such fictions. We have data. We can show you. The reason for our ban is not to protect ourselves from you, Supreme Arbitrator. It is to protect you and everything else from the consequences of your own actions in this specific location. The Silent Veil appears to be a keystone, a structural linchpin for this entire galactic sector. A full-scale incursion by your fleet with all its tearing drive fields and fracturing reactors would not simply erase your ships. It would create a resonance cascade. The shattering would propagate. It would unmake this entire star system, then the systems around it. It would be a chain reaction of absolute nullification spreading at the speed of light. That is what we meant by trigger the end. Not our end, not your end. The end of everything in this quadrant of the galaxy. An expanding bubble of nothing where something used to be. Xyler felt a coldness seep into his ancient bones that had nothing to do with the ship's life support. He finally understood the passivity of the human message. They were not threatening to flip a switch on a doomsday machine. They had simply pointed out that the Cathar fleet was, itself, a doomsday machine, and it was about to press its own self-destruct button without realizing it. Proof, Vorlag growled, his voice losing its thunderous certainty. Show us proof. Of course, Rostova replied without hesitation. We believe in verification. We would not ask you to accept such a paradigm-shifting truth on faith alone. We have prepared a demonstration. It will be unsettling, but it is necessary. The human ambassador's image was replaced by a star chart. It highlighted a system far from their current location on the other side of Cathar territory. It was uninhabited, a single dying red dwarf with no planetary bodies of consequence. Please direct your long-range observatories to this location. It is well outside the Silent Veil, in a region of spacetime as degraded as any other in your empire. You will be observing from a safe distance. Vorlag gave a curt nod to his technicians. The unyielding will's powerful sensors swiveled, focusing their gaze across the galaxy. On the main view screen, a live, magnified image of the distant red star appeared. It was a dim, sullen ball of light, ancient and unremarkable. What you must understand, Rostova's voice returned, is that we did not choose this role. We stumbled upon this truth by accident. Our own early experiments with FTL were crude, similar to yours in principle, but we detected the damage. We saw the scarring. We chose a different path, a slower, more difficult path. We learned to move with the grain of the universe, not against it. It is why our expansion has been so slow, why we appear so weak. We have been spending our time not on conquest, but on understanding. She continued, her voice a calm counterpoint to the growing tension on the Cathar command dais. We have developed the ability to create a microresonance that mimics the effect of the Silent Veil. We can, for a picosecond, create a tiny bubble of high causal stability. We are about to create such a bubble at the heart of the star you are observing. The star's own fusion reaction, a process of controlled violence, will interact with this bubble in the same way your ship's engines did. Please observe. There was a long, tense pause. The image of the red dwarf remained unchanged. Grok let out a cynical grunt. Nothing is. He never finished the sentence. The star did not explode. It did not go nova. There was no flash, no eruption of energy. Instead, something far more horrifying occurred. The star went out. One moment it was there, a sphere of dull red light, and the next it was gone. In its place was a perfect, spherical void of absolute blackness. The light from it, light that had been traveling for years to reach them, simply stopped arriving, as if its source had been retroactively erased from history. The sensors that had been locked onto it now screamed alarms, reporting not the absence of an object, but the absence of space itself. The star had not been destroyed. It had been cancelled. A wave of profound, existential horror washed over the Cathar. The silence was broken by the sound of the sensor technician retching into a waste receptacle. Grok stumbled back, his bronze carapace looking suddenly dull and fragile. Vorlag stared, his multiple eyes wide with a terror he had never known, a terror that went beyond death to the very concept of non-existence. Xyler was the only one who remained composed, though his mind felt as if it were fracturing under the weight of the revelation. He looked at the perfect black sphere on the view screen, and then at the serene face of the human ambassador, which had now returned. He saw her not as an enemy, not as a primitive, but as a messenger from a reality deeper and more terrifying than his people had ever imagined. The ban, Xyler said, his voice barely a whisper, the understanding dawning with crushing clarity. The ban was not a threat, it was a quarantine. You were not protecting your world from us. You were protecting the universe from us. Ambassador Rostova gave a slow, somber nod. Yes, Elder Xyler, that is the truth of it. Your quest for order has been inadvertently spreading the ultimate chaos. We did not wish for this confrontation. We simply wish for existence to continue. The line we have drawn is not a border of our territory. It is the boundary of a fundamental law of reality that you cannot violate without causing unimaginable destruction. We ask you, we implore you to turn back. to reconsider the path your civilization has taken. We will help you. We can show you our technology, our understanding of physics. There is another way, a way that does not consume the future to fuel the present. Vorlag stood motionless, his entire worldview, the foundation of his empire and his own identity, shattered. He was not a conqueror. He was not an agent of order. He was a force of cosmic decay, a blind king leading his people toward an oblivion of their own making. He looked at the grand fleet arrayed around him, once a symbol of his power, now a collection of ticking time bombs. He looked at the calm, patient human, a representative of a species he had dismissed as insects, who now held the fate of his galaxy in her hands, not through force of arms, but through a simple, terrible understanding of the truth. His pride, his certainty, his unyielding will, all of it crumbled to dust in the face of that perfect, star-eating blackness on his view screen. He slowly raised a hand, a gesture of command that felt heavy, leaden with the weight of his newfound ignorance. "Turn the fleet around," he commanded, his voice a hollow echo of its former power. "All ships, retreat, now." The Cathar Ascendancy, for the first time in its long and storied history, turned back not from a superior force, but from a superior understanding. The great river of steel and fire reversed its course, flowing away from the invisible line, away from the silent veil, and away from the quiet, unassuming species that had shown them the true face of the abyss. The confrontation was over, but the true, far greater and more terrifying journey had just begun. The aftermath was not one of celebration or conquest, but of quiet, profound revolution. The Grand Conclave was recalled, but this time, the chamber of obsidian and starlight was filled not with arrogance, but with a somber, fearful humility. The human demonstration had been recorded and disseminated to every corner of the Ascendancy. The visual of a star being erased from existence was an argument more powerful than any philosophical treatise or military threat. It broke the Cathar's spirit of conquest, replacing it with a desperate search for knowledge. Supreme Arbitrator Vorlag, a changed being, stepped down from his position, sequestering himself in a monastic retreat to contemplate the sins of his civilization. Elder Xyler, by unanimous decree, was appointed as the interim steward of the Ascendancy, tasked not with expansion, but with survival. His first act was to formally accept humanity's offer of aid. The vessel of Ambassador Eva Rostova was invited into the heart of the Cathar Empire, not as a prize or a prisoner, but as a teacher. The small, elegant ship docked within the cavernous hangar of the Unyielding Will, an island of white serenity amidst a sea of grim, utilitarian war metal. A new kind of alliance was forged, one born not of mutual interest or shared threat, but of a student's desperate need for a master. Human scientists and Cathar engineers began a painstaking collaboration. The humans shared their understanding of spacetime mechanics, of zero-point energy extraction that worked in harmony with reality rather than at war with it. The Cathar, in turn, offered their vast experience in macroengineering, their logistical genius, and the sheer industrial might of their empire. The first project was a monumental undertaking, the slow, arduous process of retrofitting the entire Cathar fleet and all their planetary power systems. The old, destructive reactors were decommissioned, the tearing FTL drives disassembled. It was like a global disarmament, but the weapons being dismantled were the very engines of their civilization. The Ascendancy slowed, its borders contracted, its once unstoppable expansion halted. It was a painful, humbling process, but it was accepted with a grim determination. They had stared into the abyss, and they would do anything not to fall into it. Xyler and Rostova spent a great deal of time together, bridging the immense cultural and psychological gap between their species. In the quiet observation lounges of Cathar Prime, they would watch the twilit skies and speak of philosophy, of purpose, of the future. "'Tis a strange paradox," Xyler mused one cycle, his multifaceted eyes watching the slow dance of the planet's twin moons. "For millennia we sought power. We believed power was the ability to impose one's will upon the universe. We built fleets, conquered stars, and reshaped worlds. We defined our existence by the magnitude of our impact. You, on the other hand, you sought understanding. You defined your existence by your ability to listen to the universe, to perceive its underlying structure. And in the end, your path has yielded a power far greater than ours. The power not to command, but to comprehend." "Power was never our goal," Rostova replied, her gaze distant. "Survival was. We saw the flaw in the foundation. We understood that a house built on a cracking slab of stone is doomed, no matter how magnificent its spires. We were not more virtuous, Elder Xyler. We were simply more afraid. fear can be a powerful catalyst for wisdom. As trust grew, the humans invited a select group of Cathar scientists to join them on an expedition into the Silent Veil itself. A joint research vessel, the Steward's Hope, was commissioned, its human-designed drive core humming in quiet harmony with the cosmos. It crossed the line without incident, gliding into the serene, quantum-damped region of space. The Cathar on board felt the difference immediately. It was a sense of profound peace, of rightness, as if they had spent their entire lives in a storm and had only just entered the calm eye. Their mission was to study the veil, to understand why it was so stable and what its purpose might be. It was humanity's belief that it was a natural formation, a cosmic anomaly. They were once again incorrect. As their ship ventured deeper into the veil, their long-range sensors, operating with unprecedented clarity in the pristine spacetime, detected something. It was faint, structured, and impossibly ancient. A signal buried deep within the heart of the veil, emanating from a point where no star or planet existed. They followed it. For weeks they traveled deeper into the silent, starless black, drawn by a whisper that had been waiting for untold eons. They arrived at its source to find nothing, empty space. But the signal was there all around them, embedded in the very fabric of reality. It was not a radio wave or a neutrino burst. It was a message encoded in the quantum state of the vacuum itself. A message that could only be read in a place as stable as the Silent Veil. It took the combined intellect of both species months to decode it. As the final layers of the message were peeled back, Zyler, Rostova, and the chief scientists of both their peoples gathered in the briefing room of the Steward's Hope. The air was thick with anticipation. The translated text began to scroll across the main screen. It was not a greeting. It was a last will and testament, a final, desperate warning. The message was from a civilization that called themselves the Weavers. They had existed billions of years before the Cathar, before humanity had even evolved. They too had reached for the stars. They too had discovered the principle of substrate decay, but they discovered it too late. They had tried to reverse it to heal the damage they had inflicted upon the universe. But as they studied it, they found a horrifying truth. The decay was not entirely natural. It is not a flaw, the translation read, the words stark and chilling. It is a design. We discovered a consciousness in the substrate, a being or a force that is not of our reality but preys upon it. It does not consume matter or energy as we understand it. It consumes possibility. It feeds on the accelerated entropy, the erasure of information, the dissolution of physical law. It is a harvester of cosmic decay. A collective gasp went through the room. The Cathar scientists exchanged looks of dawning horror. Rostova's face was pale, her usual calm replaced by a grim, focused intensity. The message continued. This entity is patient. It is subtle. It does not manifest. It guides. It whispers technological secrets into the dreams of nascent civilizations, the gift of faster-than-light travel, the secret of limitless energy. Always the same flawed, destructive principles, presented as the easiest, most efficient path. It turns entire galaxies into its farms, seeding them with civilizations that will, over millions of years, cultivate the decay upon which it feeds. It is the great filter. It is not an obstacle to be overcome. It is a predator that culls civilizations by teaching them how to destroy themselves and their reality for its own sustenance. The Weavers described their final, desperate war. A war not against ships or armies, but against a fundamental concept. They fought to heal reality itself. They failed. Their civilization was consumed, not by explosions, but by the slow, inexorable advance of the decay they could no longer halt. As a final act, they gathered the last of their unimaginable power and created the Silent Veil. This region is not a natural anomaly, the final passage read. It is a sanctuary, a final repository of pristine, uncorrupted reality. We have encoded our knowledge, our history, and this warning into its very fabric. It is a seed planted in the hope that one day a species will arise that is wise enough to see the flaws in the predator's gifts, a species that chooses the difficult path. If you are reading this, then you are that species. The harvest is coming. The universal decay is accelerating. The entity will notice this sanctuary has been disturbed. It will turn its gaze upon you. We could not stop it. We could only leave this message. The fight is now yours. The fate of reality is in your hands. Do not let our memory be the last. The message ended. The screen went blank, but the words hung in the air, an indictment of cosmic proportions. The conflict between Earth and the Cathar Empire, the crisis that had almost torn a quadrant of the galaxy apart, was revealed for what it truly was. A minor squabble between two different crops on the same doomed farm. Xyler looked at Rostova, his ancient mind reeling. The pride of his people, their millennia of conquest, had been a lie. They were not masters, they were cattle, fattening their own universe for the slaughter. Humanity, in its caution and its fear, had been the first to notice the farmer's hand. "We thought we had found the truth," Xyler said, his voice heavy with the weight of this new, terrifying purpose. "But we had only found the lock on the cage." Rostova met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewscreen. Her calm had returned, but it was a different kind of calm now. Not the serenity of a scholar, but the focused resolve of a sentinel. "Then we must find the key," she said simply. Aboard the steward's Hope, suspended in the heart of an artificial sanctuary at the edge of oblivion, the two species stood united. Their old animosities were gone, dwarfed by a foe beyond their comprehension. They were no longer Cathar and human. They were the inheritors of a forgotten war, the last line of defense for existence itself. Outside, the vast, silent, and now deeply menacing starfield stretched on into an infinity that was no longer empty, but hungry. And for the first time, they were ready to fight back.